Reborn into this world by Saber Chapter 3. Experiments. Day 1. Shugel's lab was a maze of machinery, vials, and cages, each test subject contributing to his obsessive quest for answers. The latest specimen was the most intriguing of all. A creature, a liquid mass that could mimic human forms. This thing, this anomaly, had already surpassed his wildest expectations. Dr. Shugel stood before the containment chamber, staring intently at the creature inside. The dark liquid shifted slightly, reacting to his presence. It had once mimicked the form of Paul, the missing boy from the orphanage, but now it lay dormant in its amorphous, fluid state, like a living shadow. Shugel's smile broadened, a hint of madness in his expression. We're going to dissect it, of course. Piece by piece, we'll understand what makes it tick. Its regenerative abilities, its capacity to mimic human features, everything. If we can harness these traits, imagine the possibilities for our soldiers on the front lines. The creature, a dark, viscous substance, seemed to pulse in its containment chamber. It wasn't just any liquid, its form shimmered with an otherworldly quality, as if it were alive even when still. Though it had replicated the body of Paul before, it now stayed in its natural liquid state, rarely attempting to shift into any recognizable shape. Strange, Shugel muttered to himself, observing its occasional efforts to reform. From time to time, the creature tried. Then failed to adopt Paul's human form again, as if something was missing. It might be dormant, Shugel mused, tapping the glass. But it's still very much active in this state. Fascinating. Rudersdorf, watching from the side, frowned. It still can't hold a human shape. It's dormant, or perhaps conserving energy, Shugel explained. But even in this form, it's active. The liquid is its default state, it seems, but from time to time, it attempts unsuccessfully to return to human form. Fascinating, isn't it? The creature rippled again, as though it could sense the scientist's intentions. Zetor, standing at a distance, remained silent but observant. He didn't share Shugel's enthusiasm for the experiment, but his curiosity had been piqued nonetheless. Shugel moved quickly, grabbing a set of instruments designed to measure magical power. Now, let's see what we're dealing with. He dragged over a scale that would gauge the creature's magical output. If it mimicked Paul once, it's bound to have immense power. I suspect it could be off the charts. Rudersdorf folded his arms, watching with a mixture of skepticism and interest. And if it is? Then we'll have proof that this thing is unlike anything we've encountered. Its potential could be limitless. Shugel activated the device, and as the scale's probes made contact with the liquid creature, the entire room seemed to hum with energy. At first, the readings were moderate, but within seconds, the scale began to vibrate violently. Shugel's eyes widened in anticipation. The machine's readings surged higher, far beyond normal limits. Then, with a sudden, deafening crack, the scale shattered, sending shards of metal and glass across the lab. The energy from the creature had overloaded the system entirely. Zetor instinctively stepped back as Rudersdorf shielded his face from the flying debris. Shugel, however, remained still, staring at the ruined machine with a grin stretching across his face. It broke the scale, he whispered. The power it contains. It's unimaginable. Rudersdorf brushed glass from his uniform, his expression hardening. What now? You've proven it's powerful, but can it be controlled? Shugel turned toward him, excitement barely contained. That's the next step. We'll test its limitations, push it further, see just how far we can go. The potential applications for the military. Zetor interrupted, his voice stern. This thing was once Paul, a child. Don't forget that. Shugel waved his hand dismissively. Paul is gone, General. What we have here is a new being, something far more significant than a mere child. It's capable of mimicking life itself. Imagine what we could achieve if we unlock its secrets. Rudersdorf narrowed his eyes. And what if it remembers? What if this thing starts to regain Paul's memories? His voice was low, as though he had spoken aloud a fear that had been gnawing at him. Shugel paused at that. The thought had crossed his mind, but he brushed it aside. It's highly unlikely. Whatever this is, it has no need for the boy's memories. It's purely instinct at this point. Reacting, adapting. The personality is secondary to the form. That's an assumption, Zetor pointed out, his voice cutting through Shugel's bravado. And assumptions have a way of leading to unexpected consequences. The scientist sighed, his hands gripping the edge of the containment chamber. "We won't know for certain until we conduct more tests. But General, let's not fool ourselves. This isn't Paul. This is something greater. We have the chance to rewrite the future of warfare with this." As Shugul spoke, the creature inside the containment chamber shifted again. It formed a vague shape, resembling a human face. Paul's face, but the features were distorted, incomplete. The eyes were hollow, the mouth an empty void. Then, as quickly as it had formed, the image collapsed back into the dark liquid. Rudersdorf took a step forward, his voice filled with suspicion. "You say it's instinct, but it keeps trying to mimic the boy." Shugul scribbled down notes, his focus unwavering. "Yes, and it's failing each time. It's attempting to stabilize, but something is preventing it. We'll need more tests to figure out why it can't maintain the human form." "What if it succeeds?" Rudersdorf pressed, his tone growing darker. "What if it becomes the boy again? Or something else?" Shugul glanced up, a dangerous gleam in his eye. "Then we'll have achieved something unprecedented. A being that can take on any form, controlled at will. Imagine the potential for espionage, infiltration, or combat. This could be the perfect soldier." Zetor, standing in the shadows, watched the interaction closely. His lips tightened as he considered Shugul's words. "Just remember, Shugul, that sometimes it's better to leave certain things untouched." "Untouched?" Shugul scoffed, shaking his head. "That's the language of caution, of fear. Progress doesn't come from restraint, General. It comes from pushing boundaries, from discovering the unknown." "At what cost?" Zetor asked, his voice cold. "This thing, Paul or not, wasn't created in a lab. It was found. And whatever force brought it here, we don't fully understand it." Shugul chuckled softly, ignoring the warning in Zetor's tone. "Tomorrow, we'll push the boundaries further," he declared, a wild grin spreading across his face. "This is just the beginning. We're on the cusp of something extraordinary." The lights in the lab flickered briefly, casting long shadows on the walls. Shugul's focus never wavered from the containment chamber, his mind racing with new ideas for experiments. There would be no limits to his research, not with something this extraordinary at his disposal. Rudersdorf turned to Zetor, his voice low. "You know this is dangerous, if he keeps pushing." "I know," Zetor interrupted, his eyes fixed on Shugul. "But we need him, for now." As the generals turned to leave, the creature in the chamber shifted one last time, its dark liquid rippling as though reacting to the tension in the air. The vague outline of Paul's face surfaced again, holding for just a moment longer than before. Then, just as quickly, it dissolved back into the shapeless mass. Day 2. The following morning brought an oppressive stillness to the bunker, broken only by the soft hum of machinery. Shugul was the first to arrive, his heart racing with anticipation. He had hardly slept, his mind consumed by thoughts of the creature and the possibilities that lay ahead. His excitement was palpable as he approached the lab, his footsteps echoing in the silent halls. As he stepped into the lab, the sight of the containment chamber sent a shiver of excitement through him. The dark liquid within seemed to shimmer, as though responding to his presence. Shugul approached the chamber, eyes gleaming with determination. "Today, we delve deeper," he murmured to himself, pulling out his notebook filled with sketches and theories. He had spent the night refining his hypothesis, fine-tuning the next steps, and now, he was ready to push the creature further. Moments later, Rudersdorf entered the lab, his expression unreadable but clearly cautious after yesterday's events. "What's the plan for today, Shugul?" His voice carried a hint of wariness. "We're going to push it," Shugul replied, barely able to contain his eagerness. "I want to see how much energy it can produce before reaching its breaking point. It's time to test its regenerative abilities." He gestured toward a collection of instruments and vials lined up on a nearby table. "We'll combine samples from our other subjects, test them in tandem with the creature." Rudersdorf's frown deepened. "Combining samples from the other subjects with this creature? You're walking a fine line of reckless experimentation." His tone carried a note of concern, though he remained composed. Shugul waved him off, impatience bubbling up. "Reckless? Discovery requires boldness, General. If we want to unlock its full potential, we can't afford to play it safe." Zetor arrived as Shugul was finalizing his preparations, his eyes surveying the room with a cautious gaze. "I hope you're not planning anything too drastic, Shugul." This creature is still largely unknown, and any misstep could be disastrous. Shugel, not missing a beat, responded, "We're on the verge of something unprecedented. What we uncover today could redefine our understanding of biology, magic, everything." His focus was unwavering. With that, Shugel began his work. He carefully extracted a sample of the creature's liquid form, noting how the dark mass seemed to pulse as if aware of its surroundings. As he siphoned a portion into a vial, the liquid reacted violently, swirling and rising against the edges of the containment chamber. It was as if the creature was resisting, aware of the experiment being conducted on it. Fascinating, Shugel whispered to himself, eyes gleaming with manic curiosity. He continued without hesitation, moving on to collect samples from the other test subjects in the lab, a series of vials containing blood and magical essences from other experimental subjects. Each sample was placed carefully in a machine designed to merge them. The device buzzed to life, its mechanisms humming with energy. Shugel watched intently, hands gripping the controls as he initiated the merging process. At first, there was no immediate reaction, just the whir of machinery. Then, suddenly, the creature responded. Its dark liquid surged violently against the chamber walls, thrashing as if it sensed the merging process. "Look at that!" Shugel's voice was breathless with awe. "It's reacting to the combined samples." On the control panel, the energy readings spiked dramatically, causing the equipment to vibrate. Alarms began to blare, the lights flashing red as the readings soared higher and higher, well beyond safe limits. "Shut it down!" Rudersdorf shouted over the noise, his tone urgent as the containment chamber rattled. But Shugel was mesmerized. "No, wait, we're seeing something incredible." His eyes were glued to the chamber, where the creature's form was fluctuating wildly. The containment chamber continued to pulse and shake as if on the verge of bursting. The creature, now agitated beyond control, began to take shape. A vague, humanoid form appeared within the liquid, a face emerged, but it was distorted, incomplete, and quickly collapsed back into the dark liquid. Then, in a final, blinding surge, the energy peaked, flooding the room with light before everything went dark. The alarms ceased, the machines powered down, and a tense silence settled over the lab. Shugel stumbled backward, momentarily blinded. Zetor was the first to break the silence. "Is it still contained?" His voice was calm but tense. Shugel scrambled to the control panel, adjusting dials and switches as his vision cleared. His heart pounded as he scanned the readouts. "It's still there," he breathed in relief. "But something's different." Zetor pointed toward the containment chamber. The liquid had settled once more, but there was something strange about it now, a pulse, a rhythm, as though it was breathing. The form was different too. This time, the liquid had maintained more of a distinct shape. A flicker of human-like features appeared, a face, eyes, but it still lacked definition, melting back into its liquid state. Shugel leaned in, his breath catching. "It's adapting," he whispered, voice trembling with exhilaration. "This is beyond anything I imagined. Or more dangerous than we thought," Zetor added, his eyes narrowing. "What if it evolves beyond our control?" Shugel didn't seem to hear him, lost in his own reverie. No. Tomorrow, we increase the dosage," he muttered. "We push it further, see just how far it can go." Rudersdorf stepped closer, a warning tone in his voice. "You're playing with fire, Shugel. One miscalculation and that thing could break free. This isn't just some experiment, it's a potential weapon." Shugel turned toward the general, his smile widening. "But that's exactly the point, isn't it? We're not just experimenting, we're on the verge of creating something revolutionary." As the conversation lingered, the tension in the air grew thicker. Zetor and Rudersdorf exchanged uneasy glances, but Shugel was undeterred. He had crossed a line in his mind, and there would be no turning back. As he left the lab that evening, Shugel could feel the weight of the creature's potential settling over him like a cloak. Tomorrow, he would push it further. He would go beyond the limits of understanding, beyond the limits of control, and into the unknown. Day 3. The following day dawned with a foreboding heaviness in the air, yet Shugel arrived at the lab fueled by ambition. He barely noticed the change in atmosphere, his mind racing with the implications of the previous day's experiment. The thought of harnessing the creature's newfound adaptability consumed him. As he entered the bunker, the familiar hum of machinery greeted him. He hurried to the containment chamber, where the liquid creature lay, its surface rippling occasionally. Today, we push the boundaries even further, Shugel declared to himself, grabbing the prepared vials filled with the various samples he had collected. The earlier results had shown potential, but he wanted more. Rudersdorf arrived, looking more skeptical than ever. You're seriously planning to inject more samples? After what happened yesterday? His voice held a note of urgency, though he tried to remain composed. Yes. We need to understand its limits, General. If we can control this, we can change the face of warfare. Shugel's words were rapid, fevered, his thoughts racing ahead of him. Zetor, following closely behind, crossed his arms, his posture firm. Shugel, this is a living being, not just a tool for your experiments. What if it becomes uncontrollable? We've already seen signs of intelligence, possibly self-awareness. Shugel waved off their concerns with a dismissive gesture. It's already beyond that. It has the potential to transform everything. His eyes sparkled with fervor as he lined up the vials, preparing for the next phase. If we stop now, we'll lose our opportunity to uncover what it's truly capable of. Or we'll lose control entirely, Rudersdorf muttered under his breath. Ignoring the warning, Shugel began the process, his hands moving with the precision of a man completely absorbed in his work. As he injected the first sample into the containment chamber, a low rumble echoed through the bunker, causing the lights to flicker. Shugel paused, his gaze flicking briefly to the chamber. The liquid stirred, as if disturbed by the introduction of new material. Look at it respond. It's. Before he could finish, a loud crack echoed through the lab as the containment chamber began to shake violently. Shugel's exhilaration turned to alarm. The liquid creature surged and twisted, its form growing more chaotic by the second. Shugel, shut it down, Rudersdorf shouted, stepping back as the glass vibrated dangerously. With a quick press of a button, Shugel tried to contain the situation, but it was too late. The liquid creature surged, shattering the containment glass in a brilliant flash of energy. Shugel stumbled back, wide-eyed. No, this can't be happening. The creature, now fully released, swirled chaotically in the air, forming vague shapes and faces, each one reminiscent of Paul's features. The laboratory was filled with a blinding light as the creature seemed to absorb the very essence of the surroundings. Rudersdorf grabbed Shugel, pulling him away from the tumultuous mass. We need to escape. But Shugel was entranced, unable to tear his gaze away from the creature. It's beautiful, he whispered, captivated by its form. Look at it. It's evolving. The creature twisted in the air, forming a grotesque amalgamation of Paul's likeness, each feature more pronounced and distorted than before. Its hollow eyes glimmered with a strange intelligence. The shape it took flickered between human-like and monstrous, as if struggling to maintain its form. It's becoming something more, Shugel murmured, his voice filled with awe. This isn't just evolution. It's adapting at a speed far beyond what we predicted. Zetor took a step forward, his voice steady but urgent. You have to control it, Shugel. If you don't, it could be the end of us all. The room vibrated with the energy of the creature, its dark mass now swirling around the lab, causing equipment to crash against the walls. The air grew thick with tension as Shugel finally snapped out of his trance. All right, I'll try to contain it. He raced to the control panel, frantically inputting commands to activate the emergency protocols. The creature sensed Shugel's intent and momentarily calmed, the chaotic energy coalescing into a singular mass. As the control panel lit up, the energy fluctuations began to stabilize, but not without a struggle. The creature pressed against its confinement, the liquid form writhing as if testing the boundaries. With a final surge of will, Shugel redirected the energy back into the containment unit. The creature writhed and fought against the confinement, but slowly, it began to relent. The liquid mass stilled, retreating into the chamber, though its presence still felt ominous. As the last remnants of its power were absorbed, Shugel stood panting, the lab around him a wreck of shattered glass and overturned equipment. Rudersdorf, breathless, glared at Shugel. You put us all at risk for your obsession. His voice was edged with fury. Zetor nodded in agreement, his gaze sharp. What you saw as beauty could easily become our destruction. We need to rethink our approach. Shugel shook his head, defiance hardening his expression. No, we're close. I can feel it. I won't stop now. The potential for our military, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Zetor took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. Shugal, you've crossed a line. You're treating this as though it's just another experiment, but it's far more dangerous than that. You need to start thinking about the long-term consequences. But Shugal wasn't listening. His hands trembled as he jotted down his observations, muttering to himself about the next phase, how to push the creature even further. Tomorrow, he murmured, almost as if in a trance, we'll unlock its true power. I'll show them what it can become. As he left the lab that day, Shugal felt an insatiable hunger for knowledge clawing at him. He was on the brink of discovery, and nothing would deter him from pursuing the truth of the creature, no matter the cost. Day 4. The atmosphere in the bunker was thick with tension as Shugal prepared for his final experiment. This time, the stakes were higher than ever before. Zetor and Rudersdorf, wary of another disaster, had brought additional security. They reinforced the room with heavier plating, especially fortifying the glass chamber with reinforced, enchanted glass. Mage soldiers, handpicked for their prowess, filled the room, their eyes scanning the lab warily. Zetor and Rudersdorf stood near the control console, their expressions grim. The previous day's encounter had left them shaken, and though Shugal's obsession remained unbroken, doubt clouded their minds. You understand the risks, Shugal, Zetor cautioned, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His tone was no longer advisory but firm. Yesterday's experiment was chaotic. If this goes wrong again. I know, Shugal interrupted, his voice tight with determination. He stared into the glowing containment chamber, where the creature lay dormant, its surface eerily still. But today, I intend to communicate with it. I need to understand what it wants, if it even has desires at all. Rudersdorf raised an eyebrow, skepticism thick in his voice. You think it can respond? It's a creature of liquid, not a human. Not yet, perhaps, Shugal countered, the intensity in his gaze unwavering. But it possesses consciousness. I'm certain of that. If we can unlock its ability to communicate, we may gain invaluable insights into its potential. His eyes gleamed with excitement at the thought. With the familiar mix of apprehension and anticipation hanging in the air, Shugal moved toward the reinforced containment chamber. The creature within, now a mass of dark liquid, barely stirred as if conserving its energy for the inevitable confrontation. Shugal held a fresh device in his hands, a voice box harvested from a cadaver, reworked to function as a crude bridge between human speech and whatever form of intelligence this creature possessed. It's worth a try, Shugal muttered under his breath, his fingers tightening around the device. The mage soldiers, ready for any eventuality, surrounded him, magic brimming at their fingertips. They cast protective barriers across the room, their faces grim beneath their helmets. Be careful, Shugal, Zetor warned, his voice grave. This thing is more unpredictable than you realize. Ignoring the caution, Shugal moved forward, heart pounding. I'm going to introduce this device, he announced, his voice steady. It could help it speak, or at least understand. He carefully placed the voice box into the tube that connected to the containment chamber. The tension in the room mounted as Shugal activated the device. A low hum emanated from the machinery, vibrating through the air, its sound echoing off the reinforced walls. The creature stirred immediately, its dark surface rippling in response. Shugal leaned closer, his pulse quickening. Can you understand me? If you can, try to communicate. The liquid shifted, forming vague shapes. A grotesque face pressed against the glass, its features blurry, unfinished. The voice box crackled, but no sound emerged. The creature pulsed rhythmically, its attempt to convey something agonizingly clear but ultimately unsuccessful. It's not enough, Shugal whispered, frustration edging his voice. It needs more magic. Turning back to the soldiers, he gestured toward the vials containing magical samples. Prepare another set of infusions, more magic this time. We need to enhance its capabilities. Rudersdorf stepped forward, clearly frustrated. Shugal, you're pushing it too far. We barely contained it yesterday. You're introducing too many unknowns. Trust me, General, Shugal shot back, his eyes wild with ambition. I know what I'm doing. This is our only way forward. The soldiers exchanged wary glances but complied, imbuing the samples with their magic. Once they were ready, Shugal injected them into the chamber. The creature convulsed violently, its liquid form expanding and contracting as it absorbed the magical essence. The air grew thick with tension as the creature began to twist and shift, its dark mass contorting as it struggled to solidify into something recognizable. Shugel's breath caught in his throat. Come on. Respond. He urged, his voice tight with desperation. He had to make this work. The creature stilled for a moment, then pulsed with energy. The chamber trembled as it attempted to form a face, its features grotesque but discernible. Hollow eyes locked onto Shugel. Shugel, it's destabilizing. Zetor shouted, his voice barely containing the rising panic. No, it's evolving. Shugel responded, exhilaration coursing through him. This is it. It's learning. The creature's form solidified further, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed to regard Shugel with an eerie, almost human awareness. He took a step closer, heart pounding. Can you hear me? Can you understand? His voice trembled with hope. Then, to the shock of everyone in the room, the voice box crackled to life. Distorted sounds echoed from the device, a garbled mess of echoes, gurgles, and half-formed words. Yo. Mu. Shugel's eyes widened in realization. It knows. It's trying to speak. His voice was triumphant. The soldiers tensed, their hands twitching as they prepared to defend against whatever might come next. Rudersdorf's brow furrowed, his voice thick with concern. Shugel, this is dangerous. It could become hostile at any moment. No. This is a breakthrough. Shugel shouted back, his focus entirely on the creature. It's trying to connect. Suddenly, the creature began to convulse, its liquid mass surging against the containment unit. The voice box emitted louder, distorted noises as the creature's form flickered and twisted. It seemed to be in agony. Save. Me. Zetor's voice cut through the chaos, it's saying something. What does it mean? Shugel stared at the writhing creature, his mind racing. It's asking for help. It wants to be saved. But before he could react, the glass of the containment chamber shattered. Shards of reinforced glass flew through the air as the creature surged free, its liquid mass flooding the room. Stand back. One of the mage soldiers shouted, raising a magical barrier as the creature spiraled through the air. It twisted and morphed, taking on distorted images of Paul's face, flickering between human and monstrous forms. The creature's voice rang out again, this time louder, clearer. Save me. Shugel stepped forward, mesmerized by the voice. I can help you. I just need more time. The creature swirled violently, enveloping Shugel in its dark, icy embrace. He gasped as the liquid surrounded him, pulling him into its depths. No. Rudersdorf raised his weapon, prepared to strike, but Zetor stopped him. Wait. It's not attacking. Look. Inside the creature's swirling form, Shugel heard its voice echoing in his mind. He could feel the creature's desperation, its confusion, its search for an identity. It wasn't Paul, it was something else entirely, a lost being struggling to find itself. Who are you? Shugel whispered, his voice muffled by the liquid. What is your name? The creature pulsed violently, and for a brief moment, Shugel felt a connection, a shared essence. But then, as quickly as it had come, the connection shattered. The creature thrashed wildly, its form unraveling. Get him out. Rudersdorf barked, and the mage soldiers unleashed their magic, forcing the creature back into a corner of the lab. It resisted, fighting fiercely, but the soldiers' magic held strong. With a final, violent convulsion, the creature retreated, its form flickering and dissipating into the shadows. Shugel collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. His eyes were wide with revelation. It's not just a creature, it's a being searching for its lost identity. Rudersdorf stared at him, disbelief in his eyes. This thing is a threat, Shugel. But Shugel shook his head, still dazed. No. It wants to be saved. Zetor knelt beside him, his face tight with concern. What now? Shugel looked up at the remnants of the creature, his determination renewed. Tomorrow, he whispered, his voice trembling with conviction, we will find a way to bring it back. We have to. We owe it to Paul, and to whatever this being is trying to become. Day 5. The atmosphere in the lab was eerily calm compared to the previous day's chaos. Shugel arrived early, ahead of Zetor, Rudersdorf, and the soldiers, his mind racing with thoughts of the entity's fragmented communication. He couldn't stop thinking about its desperate plea. Lost. Help. Save. I. By the time Zedor and Rudersdorf entered the room, the lab was already in a state of heightened anticipation. The reinforced glass chamber, still showing cracks from yesterday's violent upheaval, held something that both fascinated and terrified everyone present. But today, something was different. Shugel stood by the observation window, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and anxiety. Inside the chamber, the creature no longer thrashed in its amorphous, liquid state. Instead, it had taken on a distinct, almost human form, though it was not Paul's. It was something new, something, its own. Zetor and Rudersdorf exchanged a glance as they approached Shugel. It's changed, Rudersdorf murmured, his voice hushed. He peered into the chamber, scrutinizing the figure standing within. The creature, now resembling a person, stood about 5 feet tall. Its body had solidified, though it retained an unnatural fluidity. The skin was pale white, though it was almost translucent, and its form, while humanoid, was sleek and smooth, lacking the roughness or definition of a typical human. Its face had sharp, angular features, almost elegant, with glowing golden eyes that seemed far too intelligent for what they once believed was a mindless entity. Its hair was short, blue, and shimmered like liquid silk, reminiscent of waves catching the sunlight. The creature's body seemed to radiate a strange, otherworldly energy, its form almost ethereal. Shugel stepped closer to the chamber's reinforced glass, his breath caught in his throat. It has a body now. But it's not the child's body, he whispered, both fascinated and unnerved. Zetor eyed the creature warily. If that's not the kid, then what, or who is it? Shugel nodded, still staring in disbelief. This must be its original form, from before it became the liquid creature we encountered. It's created an identity separate from Paul. This might be what it looked like before. He trailed off, unsure of how to describe the entity's mysterious past. The creature moved, turning its head slowly toward them, its golden eyes locking onto Shugel. There was a moment of silence, and then, it spoke, not in the jumbled, distorted way from before, but in a voice that was clear and distinctly human. Shugel. The room fell silent, every soldier and officer on edge. The sound of the creature's voice was haunting, calm, and yet, full of emotion. Shugel's heart raced as he approached the chamber cautiously. You can speak, now? He asked, his voice trembling with both fear and excitement. The creature took a step forward, its movements graceful but unnervingly fluid, like water in human form. Have ala circumflex ys tie diaresis, it said slowly, as if still adjusting to the voice it now possessed. Though it was still jumbled, it was still coherent than its old chaotic scream. Have always trd. Zetor frowned, stepping closer to Shugel. What are you? If you are not Paul, what are you? He asked, voice stern but curious. The creature tilted its head slightly, its gaze flickering with something unreadable. Iwas. Be grave fo diaresis re. Before pau grave l. Before thisfrm. Iwas. Fo acute rgotn, it said, its voice softening. But now. Iamre diaresis embeg. Shugel's eyes widened. You're regaining your memories. The creature nodded slowly, a strange sadness crossing its features. Yes. Iam. So diaresis methngoldерthnpaul, somethimore. Bummi acute es. Thyeafra grave mn tilde ted. Incomplete. Iamade diaresis. Ndtenot. Rudersdorf's face darkened as he studied the creature. Can we trust it, Shugel? It was a chaotic force just yesterday. What makes you think it won't revert to that again? Shugel hesitated, but the creature's golden eyes never wavered. I don't know for sure, Shugel admitted, his voice quiet. But we've seen its progress. It's evolved. It's trying to communicate, trying to regain what it lost. The creature took another step closer to the glass. IDNWA ring above NTTHURT. IONLWATTRMMBE grave R.O tilde BEHOEAGN. Zetor and Rudersdorf remained skeptical, but Schugel couldn't shake the feeling that this being was genuine, that it truly wanted to find its way back to what it once was. His mind raced with possibilities, theories about what this creature could be. I think we need to continue working with it, Schugel said, finally breaking the silence. It's not like before. It's learning, evolving. If we can help it remember more, we might uncover the truth about where it came from, and what it is. Rudersdorf frowned. And if it's a threat? If it becomes dangerous again? Schugel shook his head. We've come this far. I believe it wants to cooperate. Zetor sighed heavily, clearly torn. All right. But we need to keep it under strict observation. If it shows any signs of instability, we terminate the experiment. Agreed. Schugel nodded firmly, his determination unshaken. Understood. The creature watched their conversation in silence, its gaze never leaving Schugel. As the group turned to leave, Schugel paused, glancing back at the entity now standing in the chamber. I'll help you, he said softly, more to himself than to the creature. We'll find out who you are. The creature's golden eyes shimmered with an unreadable expression, and for a moment, Schugel thought he saw something like gratitude flicker across its alien features. As they exited the lab, the weight of the coming days hung heavy in the air. The experiment had taken an unexpected turn, and Schugel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, the real search for the creature's identity would begin.